those years. The great year was happening on the year of 1929. Please do not mark it as 1920. That's a wrong answer. 1929 was the year of Great Depression. Autonomous means it is independent. It automatically happens. It is not dependent. CRR is the cash reserve ratio. Now this is the statutory liquidity ratio. Good morning and welcome to the model question paper revision in economics for second PUC for the year 2022-23. Now it's quite interesting for us to see that how is the blueprint that has been decided for this particular final examination. So you can just have a look onto the screen. But anyways, I would like to make you go through very fast on this factor. There are 6 chapters in the microeconomics, 6 chapters in the macroeconomics. Out of which my weightage that I would always like you to concentrate upon is on chapter 2, where you have a 20 marks coming up here, followed by 13 marks coming up here on chapter 4, followed by chapter 6. So 2, 4 and 6. The even numbers, I want you to remember 2, 4 and 6. That will make you score about 45 marks. So 45 marks, that's about 50% of the paper is given a weightage here, followed by this 10 mark, that's another 55 marks, making it in total, followed by another 560 and a 69 marks. So you can see that the weightage that is being given for microeconomics is 69 marks. So if you have just studied those 6 chapters alone, you can be rest assured that 69 marks is going to come in the paper, out of which even if you make the choices, you will definitely pass, scoring at least 40 or 45 marks. So no need to worry here. Just the micro can make you pass, and definitely it can get you good marks also. Followed by, let's get on to the macroeconomics and analyze. Again, the second chapter scoring a 20 marks completely, and not to forget, let's get on to the last chapter, 21 marks. You can just see by 2 chapters you can score 41 marks. Chapter number 2 in macro and chapter number 6 in macro can make you get about 41 marks, which is really important and very, very good chapters. It's quite easy to learn also. Followed by, let me go on to the chapter number 3, which is my favorite chapter in macroeconomics, money and banking. You have a 14 marks coming out from that chapter. So 20 plus 21, 41, 41 plus 14, that's again 55 marks coming up on this. Followed by another 12 marks, that is 67, making up to you. We are talking about the government budget and economy, followed by 8 marks that's going to come on the determination and the introduction chapter. So nevertheless, if you just analyze the entire blueprint, they have balanced it out so well that either by studying complete macroeconomics, you can pass, or completely on the microeconomics, still you can make it. So the choice is very clear. Study one part thoroughly. That will be enough for all of you to score the best marks available. So that's why I would say that this is a very, very balanced blueprint altogether. Now, this is the kind of question paper that you will be getting in. Of course, we are going to discuss this question paper in detail. So let me just run through this model question paper for you. Moving on to section B, part C, then your part D, and finally part E, which is our model in terms of our POQ coming into picture. Now, let's get on to the answering of the question paper here. Starting with part A, utility. What is utility? We all know that utility can be objective and subjective in nature. So you go on with this choice here, followed by the next question. In a short run firm. In a short run firm, can we change the inputs? Absolutely not. So we can keep the inputs, cannot vary all the inputs. So we would keep the factor very, very clearly here. You have to keep the inputs fixed. Next one, we move on here. A market structure which produces heterogeneous. Now, please look into the word heterogeneous. So, automatically, it cannot be something where we are talking about monopoly or perfect. The answer has to be monopolistic in nature. followed by the great year of depression. Now, this is quite important. Please remember those years. The great year was happening on the year was 1929. Please do not mark it as 1920. That's a wrong answer. 1929 was the year of Great Depression. Followed by the study of national income is actually related to macroeconomics. Many people make a mistake by putting it into micro. Please don't do it. It's a macroeconomic study because you're studying the entire nation put together. Followed by the bank, which acts as a monetary authority. All of us know it. It's a very simple one. RBI is the correct answer. Followed by consumption, which is independent of income. The consumption which is independent, that's the key word. Automatically, you will tick on to the word autonomous. Why? Autonomous means it is independent. It automatically happens. It is not dependent. Followed by the taxes of individuals and firms that are taken into the factor is about the direct taxes that we are talking about, which is directly affected to that particular individual or to the firms. Followed by, in this standard, all currencies were determined in terms of gold. Now, if you look through this question, the answer is already given that you have a clue stating that what the standard is all about, and the answer is gold standard. Followed by the exchange rate is determined by market forces of. What are the market forces of this factor altogether? So you would be able to see that it is a flexible exchange rate system that you are going to talk about, where you will get both the demand and the supply coming into picture. So you can go about here. Followed by fill in the blanks that's coming up here. The answers are already given to you, so it's going to be very, very easy for us. In a monopoly market, the goods which have sold have got no substitute. So because in a monopoly market, you don't have a substitute for those goods, then that's where you will hold a complete monopoly here. Dash are defined at a particular point of time. At a particular point of time. So when I'm talking about the timestamp today at this particular hour, what is this all about? Then we talk about this word called as stock. So stock is defined at a particular point of time. Dash issues coins in India. It is the government. Government issues the coins in India. Savings that is not a part of income. Now that is exactly where we are going to talk about savings which is not a part of income, not spent on consumption. The next one. Now, non-paying users of public goods, automatically the one and the only answer is free riders. So it's very simple. If you've done both this section, automatically you have scored your 15 marks. Followed by match the following, which all of you are really good. So now let's look into it. Market economy, that's what we are going to talk about this factor. Market economy means that you know that it's a trade in goods and services. Now we are going to talk about the factor that we are going to talk here. The market economy is basically about the private economy, all about. This is from the chapter 1. We are talking about the private economy. MR, that is marginal revenue, which is equal to, change this factor, all is that's coming into picture. Now, price ceiling, which means that upper limit on the price factor. Balance of payment comes to the last chapter. Trade in goods and services. Managed floating is also known as dirty floating rate. Now, with this, 10 marks on the choose the correct answer, 5 marks on the fill up the blanks, and 5 marks on match the following. You would have already scored your 20 marks. Just imagine by solving 1 minute of your time, if you look into it and start working it out on this, you have scored your complete 20 marks. Now let's move further to part B. We're going to answer the 2-mark questions coming into picture, starting with what do you mean by inferior goods? Inferior goods are those goods where you would see that a rise in income will lead to a decrease in terms of the goods factor altogether, the price factor. Why? Because inferior is not about the quality of the goods. Inferior means to say that as the income rises, people will not choose those goods much. So that means a rise in good and a decrease in the preference, decrease in that particular activity altogether is what we give about in inferior goods. Followed by the law of demand, which is a very, very common question, most of the time repeated. Now, law of demand, keeping everything constant, change and increase in price will lead to decrease in demand or vice versa. So moment increase in price happens, there will be a decrease in the demand. Suppose that is in the quantity factor. Suppose there is a decrease in the price factor, there will be an increase in the quantity. So this is what we call it as the law of demand factor altogether. Followed by what are the differences between budget line and budget set. Now, whenever we talk about a budget line is an overall time period. It will be something like this, starting from the month of January, February, then there will be a March, then there will be an April. So this is a combination of the entire line that we are tracking together. Whereas when we talk about the budget set is a collection of all possible goods that can be bought within the income of the consumer. So this is the difference between a budget line and that of a budget set. Followed by mention the two different approaches which explains the consumer behavior. So we are going to talk about cardinal utility and we are going to talk about ordinal utility. So these are the two factors that one has to remember when we are talking about the consumer behavior. Followed by meaning of shutdown point. So when the AVC, that is the point of production, cuts down below the AVC, average variable cost, automatically what happens here, you are not able to produce more, the price of the product comes down, then this leads to the shutdown point altogether. Followed by how is the wage rate determined in India? So you're going to talk about the marginal wage rate, that is the wage rate factor. You are going to determine the need, that is the availability of labor versus that of the demand, that's a skill that's in the market. So the MRPL, the average rate of productivity per labor, what we are talking about, that's very, very important here. Why? Because that determines what is the amount that is going to be paid to a worker depending on the situation, depending on the demand for his skills. Followed by state the meaning of average revenue and marginal revenue. Average revenue, all of you know the formula here. It is equal to total revenue divided by quantity. When we are talking about marginal revenue, we are going to talk about one additional revenue that can be generated. How? By adding up one more input. So this is nothing but the total revenue TRN minus 1 minus of TRN where we are talking about. So this is your marginal revenue factor altogether. Followed by the state the features of monopoly. We have been discussing it. First thing is that there is no substitutes at all. Second thing is that there is only one price. So the most important thing is that only one seller and many buyers. So if you can just write down in a point format, automatically you can get your 2 marks here. Followed by distinguish between stock and flow. Stock is defined at a point of time. So anything at a point of time, we call it as flow. Now when we call it as stock. So when we talk about the flow means over a period of time as it keeps moving. That's what we define it as flow here. Now write the difference between nominal and real GDP. Nominal GDP is the expected one. That's what we are looking into it. The real GDP is the actual GDP that has been measured over the base here. Now, mention the two motives for demand for money. We all know it that the demand for money is for the accounting purpose. It is for the storage purpose. It is also for the transactional purpose. So you can write it from any one of that. It's a unit of value. It's a storage value. It's also that of the transactional purpose altogether. Followed by give the meaning of CRR and SLR. CRR is the cash reserve ratio. Now this is the statutory liquidity ratio. Now, write down the difference between public provision and public production. Public provision is the money that is being kept for the expenditure of public related goods and services, whereas public production is when you are producing goods for the public altogether. So anything where the government directly involves in the production, we're going to talk about this public production factor altogether. followed by what is a foreign exchange rate. A foreign exchange rate, as we are going to talk about, this is the rate at which the country will be trading its domestic currency versus that of the foreign countries, foreign exchange countries that are available. So rupee versus dollar. So when you are going to trade your currency versus the foreign country's currency, we bring in this foreign exchange rate altogether. Now, moving on to the part C, which is very important. Now, in part B, if you have completed, let me just go back and try to make you understand. Part A would have already fetched you, if you have done everything correct, 20 marks. Part B, by answering just 9 questions in part B, please look here at part B, by answering 9 questions, you will be getting 18 marks. So the total is 38. Already you have passed the examination. So part A and part B, if you guys have concentrated just on the 1 mark and 2 markers, automatically you have scored your 38 marks and you have cleared the examination. It is so very simple to pass economics. So please do pay attention to the 1 markers and 2 markers. Automatically you will be able to clear the exam. Now moving on to part C, I would like to talk about the 7 questions that is going to fetch you 28 marks here. The moment we move into part C, the mindset has to change for you. Why? Because till now you were just writing 1 sentence or writing 1 word and that was fetching you the marks. But when you move to part C, it is a long type question, which means we are expecting at least 12 sentences each. Now you need to be prepared very, very clearly to write those 12 sentences exactly, concisely, clearly, with the diagram, with the example. Then you will be able to score that full 4 marks there. Now you will have to take 7 questions out of the given 10 or 12 questions there, and you need to answer it. Definitely there will be 1 question from the chapter 1, and that is Introduction to the Microeconomics, and one of the favorite questions is define or write a note on the centrally planned economy. All of us know here that whenever we are talking about centrally planned economy, that means the economy which is planned by the government, the decisions are made by the government. Here the public will not be given choice. Here the importance will be given only to government opinion and policies. There will not be a participation of private economy. That means private enterprises and other factors will not be a part of the production process in this economy. This kind of economy is completely governed and controlled by the government. Now, followed by isoquant, which help of a diagram. Now, isoquant is basically something, even though you change the input factors, the output level remains the same. So, for example, if I'm going to change the capital, land or the labor factor altogether, whatever kind of inputs I keep changing, but the output remains to me same. That's where I say the word isoquant into picture. So you might have to draw the isoquant diagram first, then explain these factors, and then go ahead in terms of making this answer even more fruitful. Followed by write a short note on profit maximization. So you know that when P is equal to, that's price is equal to that of the marginal factors here, and MC must be non-decreasing. That is, first condition is price is equal to marginal cost. So that means yes, you are on this factor. The second condition is that the marginal cost factor should not come down. So when we draw the line, it should not be something that the marginal cost starts decreasing altogether. Why these factors are there? Very importantly, one has to understand that unless and until the marginal cost remains above the prices, that is, it has to be like this, it cannot come down, then only the earnings would be on the profitable mode and the company would be trying to make some meaningful profit. If it starts decreasing, automatically it will lead into a shutdown point altogether. Followed by explain why macroeconomics is different from micro. Now, the moment we use this word macro means to say that it is a collection. On the whole, you are going to study about the entire nation. Micro, when I use this word, that's about an individual altogether. So moment I talk about an individual versus the nation, that's where the difference between micro and macro comes into picture very clearly. Micro is the study of individual needs and wants. Macro is the study of the nation as a whole. So that's where the difference of micro versus macroeconomics always comes into picture. Followed by, write a note on externalities. Now, the word externalities have to be understood very clearly. Externalities means that any kind of factor, any kind of event that can create a positive or a negative outcome by an industry. Now, for example, by starting an industry, we will be able to give employment to hundreds and thousands of people in India. Now, that is a positive externality and external feature or factor. But on the same side, because of the industry, if the rivers or if the environment get polluted, then that is a negative externality. So what is the kind of effect that is going to come out? That is what we talk about in terms of externalities factor. Followed by, write some examples of planned accumulation and decumulation of inventories. Now, moment we know that we are into the production cycle altogether, the government takes a time in terms of accumulating the inventory and keeping it ready for some specific purposes. So whenever we say planned accumulation, that means an X amount of money has been invested, has been kept ready for the accumulation, for taking over the inventory. At the same time, when we feel that there is excess of inventory, we need to sell it off so that we can reduce the cost on the inventory holding. Followed by, money acts as a convenient of account. This is a very, very simple and generic. Whenever you pick up a question like this, money acts as a convenient of account, that means to say that this is an open sentence altogether where you will feel that you can write on your own. So yes, definitely money acts as a convenient of account. Why? Because the measurement of your account, the value of your account can be realized only through the monetary value. You cannot just go ahead and say that I have an account of X value. Now, what is the value of that account? How much money is there in that account? What have been the transactional factors of the account? That can be measured using money alone. So that is why we say that money will act as a convenient value. Using money, you can go further. Now, the next one, briefly explain the consumption function with the help of diagram. Consumption itself is a function where you're going to talk about the factors of land, labor, and capital. So you're also going to come into consumption function where you're going to talk about investment, you're going to talk about savings, you're going to talk about induced investment, induced consumption. So this consumption is basically based on the income factors here. So based on your income, you would be talking about your savings, you would be talking about your investment, and you would also be talking about your consumption factors altogether. So all these factors have to be mentioned when you are writing the answer. Now the next one is write a chart on the government budget. This you have to draw the chart altogether. Just put the chart, explain them about the capital revenue, the public account, everything. The chart is enough. Please draw it neatly with using pencil and your scale. That itself will be able to get you your full 4 marks here. The last question coming up is, does public debt pose a burden? Definitely yes. Why? Because more the amount of money that is being borrowed by a country, automatically the government will start imposing taxes on the public, which means it becomes a debt. And tomorrow the public has to bear the brunt of external borrowing cost by the government, which means definitely public debt will impose a burden. Again, the government has to pay back, government has to take this entire factor. So definitely yes, public debt will pose a burden for us. Now write a note on balance of trade, which is even more interesting. Now look at the amount of choices that you are getting in here. So you can even choose from the micro part or from the macro part. Balance of trade, we all know about it. We are going to talk about balance of payment. Then we're going to talk about the balance of transfer, how much we have taken in terms of exports versus the imports. That is what you're going to talk about in terms of balance of trade here. Followed by, let's move on to part D. Now, this is all about 6 into 4 marks. That's about, 4 questions. You have to write each of 6 marks, so you can score another 24. Now, look at part A, B, and C. Part A was for 20, part B was for 18, and part C was 28. So already, if you have done here, the score is 20 plus 18 plus 28, which means you have already scored about 66 marks here. And that's fantastic here. You've already scored your first class. Congratulations in terms of scoring your marks here. Now, if you add another 24 marks to this, this automatically becomes 90 marks. Now you are a distinction student. So that's exactly, I say, how you need to plan each and every section so that you are able to score the maximum marks here. Now, let's go on to the section where we are trying to answer the 6 marks question. There are only 4 questions that you need to answer, starting with law of diminishing marginal utility, which is a very, very common and repeated question. For this question, you need to explain with the help of a table and diagram, which is very important for you so that you are able to go through it, you are able to realize what it is, explain the law of diminishing return, then put the table column, explain it with examples, tell them how it happens in terms of diminishing utility, what is the value of utility, all those factors have to be explained, and then this would give you the complete 6 marks. Followed by short-run supply curve factor. What is a short-run supply curve factor? Moment we are talking about short-run supply curve, you need to keep in your mind that all the inputs are fixed in nature. What you would be able to do is that is the firm would try to maximize its profit within that short run, and we would try to keep the MC at the non-decreasing point altogether. The variable cost will also be at the maximum, and we will try to make the maximum profit. All these things have to be depicted using the diagram factor. That's very, very important. Please focus on the P1, Q1, the price and quantity factors on the diagram, and whenever you're drawing it, please use pencil, mark it up properly, then you will be able to score well here. Followed by explain market equilibrium. So now you're able to see that chapter 4, 5 and 6 gathers a lot of importance in the 6 markers where you will be able to score maximum mark. Explain the market equilibrium with fixed number of firms, which is very, very important. Why? Because moment the market attains equilibriums, that means the buyers and sellers are coming together. Buyers is equal to seller. If the number of buyers is more or number of sellers are more, there will be a non-equilibrium position. But moment the buyers and sellers have come together, we reach an equilibrium point altogether. So that's exactly where we are going to talk about it with the help of a diagram here. Followed by the short-run equilibrium of a monopolist. Now that word is very important because monopolist is entirely different. While you will see that the market is coming on to a different cycle altogether, the price and the consumption factors. Again, the diagram is important with the zero case cost. Suppose if there is a zero cost, that means everything that he's going to sell is going to be an absolute profit. Followed by write down some of the limitations using GDP as an index of welfare. Then you look into the shift altogether. If you are really good enough in terms of understanding microeconomics with the diagram, labeling it properly and giving an example, I would suggest you please stick on to microeconomics. Why? Because those questions which come with diagram and with a little bit of the graphical representations factor will be able to help you to score better in the examination rather than just writing down a theoretical question like this where you are just going to write down the limitations of GDP. Which means to say that I'm not demotivating you. I'm not saying that please don't attend this question. I would say that the chances of scoring more is always higher in a graphical based question rather than a plain theory question. So please make an attempt more towards the microeconomics. But nevertheless, if you feel that, sir, I'm not good in graph, I'm not able to decipher it, I will not be able to mark, I will not be able to write much, please go in for a plain theory question where you can still score your 6 marks. So now coming back, we are talking about the limitations of GDP, which is a very, very important. The limitations of GDP is that there's a double accounting standard there. We are not able to mention and calculate the welfare of the country completely. There are many times that the data is redundant dividend, and there are many times that it gets calculated multiple number of times. So GDP is not actually giving you a clear picture of the economy of the country. It's only an indicative figure that's trying to tell you the progress of a country in a particular direction. Followed by, write a story of the goldsmith Lala. I think probably this is one of the most interesting questions that most of you have attended in your preparatory as well as at the midterm at different levels altogether. The goldsmith Lala story is all about how it is actually a paper value creation of wealth that has been told about. Again, a pure theory question. You can write it in your own words. The only thing is that please don't change the story itself. Write down in your own words how he has accepted gold as a deposit and the value of gold has been kept on increasing altogether. So that's what you have to write it here. Followed by, write a note on gold standard. This is very, very important, how the Bretton Woods conference came into picture and how we have adopted gold standard as an important factor when it comes to the exchange value here and how it has been nominated in terms of calculating the currency factors. Followed by party, the model question paper. So this carries 10 marks. There are only 2 questions coming up. All of you knows about it. We are going to talk about what does the consumer want here. So you have it here. The price of bananas is 5 rupees. The mangoes is 10 rupees. The consumer income is 40 rupees. So suppose if the consumer wants to spend only on bananas, that means all you're going to do is 40 divided by 5, the answer is 8. It's very, very simple. Suppose it's going to be mango, that means it's going to be 40 divided by 10, the answer is 4. And next we move on, the budget line will be always be downward sloping, no doubt about it. And are the bundles equal? Definitely they are equal to the income only, then only you will be able to purchase it. Followed by, if you want to have more banana, you have to give up. Naturally, yes, it cannot be that you cannot keep on having both the things. So it is true that you have to give up on one product to take up the next one. Now, you know how to do this. All you have to just fit in the formula here in terms of your total product, marginal product, and your average product, and you will be able to get your values here very, very clearly. So it's a very simple methodology that we are talking about here, and this is quite it's a very, very simple factor that we are going to talk about in terms of it. You just have to add up the total and put it here. Automatically you will be able to get the values here done very, very clearly. So this is not going to be much of a challenge for you. Now, followed by the currencies. This is a most easy question repeated here. So, you know, for USA, it is dollar, the first one. The next one is UK. UK means pound. You just have to take 5 currencies. Germany is euro. That's I would like to talk about. Japan is yen. So, you've already got 4 currencies. And China, it is yuan. So you can just take this 5 currencies, easy for you to remember, rather than going for Argentina, UAE, Bangladesh, and that of Russia. So these are the 5 currencies that we want: dollar, pound, euro, yen, and that of the yuan currency. It's easy for you to remember, and you can score your complete 5 marks. With this, we come to the end of the revision of model question paper for economics, second PUC for the year 22-23. I wish all my students the very best in terms of attending this final examination, that's the board examination, and I hope and believe that all of you will be able to score the best marks in the coming exam. All you need to do is that please concentrate section-wise. Plan your studies very clearly. Go slowly in terms of attending each and every question. Find out those areas where you can really score well, like in terms of diagrams or in terms of 1-mark questions or in terms of your practical oriented questions. Segment it, target it, and you will be able to score the maximum marks in the coming exam. Wishing you all all the best, a good luck for the coming examination, and thank you once again for joining me today on this wonderful session.